Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this lovely Sunday evening. My name is Reza, and I'm a mother of two adorable boys, one 4-year-old and an 8-month-old baby. I have an educational background in psychology and a master's degree in health service administration. Today, we have two very special guests that will be discussing something that I personally found very important in our overall parenting styles. It is about having healthy relationships with our own past and our own present, and how we heal our inner child wounds before we are able to deal with our own children, and make sure we don't, let out our own wounds and in the process. So first we have Sheikh Mehdi Rastani. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, I will take a little bit of your time. Then, of course, we'll hear from Sister Sukaina, who's joining us virtually, and we're very happy to have her. Thank you very much, Sister Tatir. I was asked to do intro. I don't think I need an introduction to our dear community. I think I take their time quite frequently. I'm the resident alim of City of Knowledge, so I think brothers and sisters are already familiar. So I won't take too much time in that regard. Inshallah, we'll reserve more time to hear more from Sister Sukaina and the questions that will be coming in from the brothers and sisters. I think this topic is I have to say, initially when the topic was introduced and it was suggested, I thought it was such a beautiful and unique topic. It's one of those topics that we don't normally get to talk about very often. And that's exactly why it's so important. It's because it's a topic that's not highlighted as often as it should be in our communities. So of course, if you've seen the flyer, if you've seen the topic, it's about your inner child wounds, right? I think it's a very telling topic. Those issues that you might have been dealing with that really stem and go back to your own childhood, your own experience, your own upbringing, the environment and the atmosphere in which you were raised, which then manifests itself and shows itself in the way that you go about life, in the way you interact with your spouse, you interact with your children as an adult, right? Many times when we look at an adult, we usually see them as separated, as disconnected from their childhood, whereas in reality, if this is one continuous individual, and an experience that this individual might have had at the age of 5 or 6 or 10, 12, 15 can easily impact the life of this person, and can even be at times the reason behind some of the characteristics that this person has in their adulthood. And for someone who may not know this person as well as they know themselves, this might be hidden to other people. Sometimes it's even hidden to the person themselves, right? Meaning that I might have gone through an experience. This experience as a child has shaped the way I look at the world, the way I interact with others. And I'll give some more examples of this, some more practical examples of this. And it might not even be clear to me. I just might be, in my mind, it's just second nature at this point, right? To react in a certain way, to walk or talk or behave in a certain way. Whereas if I were to take some time to study where this characteristic is really stemming from, where is it really coming from? Sometimes when you get down to the roots of it, you find that, oh, this actually goes back to the way, for example, I was raised, right? The way that the experience that I had as a child, as an adolescent, continuing all the way till adulthood. So in this limited time that I'll have, inshallah, we'll pass it on to Sister Kane. I just want to get a little bit of the foundation ready here, that there's two different ways that this shows itself. Sometimes it has to do with the characteristics that a person has. Sometimes it has to do with the worldview that a person has. Okay, and I'll give examples of both of these so that, inshallah, I can clarify a little bit more what I mean by that. Sometimes there are characteristics that are built through the experiences that I had in childhood. A very good example of this is the insecurities that an individual can have. And insecurities, just in my limited experience, having sat down with couples, especially young couples, and discussing sometimes struggles that they're going through, which is a normal thing, and we need to normalize really in our communities this idea of consulting about these issues and reaching out and asking for help. This is not, it's not a sign of a failing marriage. No, it's a sign of a healing marriage when you reach out for help. But in my experience, a lot of times when you actually look at why this person is acting the way they're acting in their interactions with their spouse and with their children, and it can go for man or woman, it can go either way. Sometimes you go to the roots, you find the root has to do with an insecurity that has to do with what this person has experienced from a very young age, right? That could be an experience they had, or it can be an experience that their parents had, for example, that's been passed down to them. Sometimes it's this, sometimes it's characteristics that a person has. Sometimes, for example, you will find it's not necessarily a characteristic directly, it's more about the way this person thinks he's supposed to live his life or she's supposed to live her life. In the way that she, for example, plays a role as a woman. What does it mean to be a woman, right? A lot of us have our understanding from family, right? Have our understanding from the previous generation. But then sometimes there needs to be an unlearning of what we learned growing up in the cultures that we grew up in, to then look back at this guidance that I have, for example, in terms of what is the role of a woman in a household, what is the role of a man in a household, for example, and see whether it really matches with what Islam wants me to do. I'll give you a very basic example. The role of a man in a household, the role of the husband in the household, right? Traditionally, this role might be a role that I might look at my father or great grandfather or whatever the case might be, my grandfather, and see a person who, for example, not all fathers are like this. This is just an example. I might see someone who's not necessarily involved in the day-to-day affairs of the family. I might see someone who is somewhat disconnected even emotionally in terms of the presence in the household, in terms of having a relationship with different members in the household. I might see a person who's not very connected. And so I walk away with this understanding that this is how a husband and a father is supposed to walk and talk and carry himself. He's supposed to do things in this particular way. Whereas Islamically, this is not what the Quran tells us. The Quran tells us in Surah An-Nur, tawafuna, the individuals within the household, they are tawafuna, some of them are doing tawaf, meaning that they are so closely connected with one another. It's almost as if they're constantly revolving around one another, right? My role, if it's a female we're referring to, what is the role of a woman? Is her role only supposed to be seen in the light of raising children? Or no, does she have another part of her identity as well? Even though that's important, but is that the only role that she's supposed to play? So these are parts of our worldview that we have learned from our previous generations, from our childhood, what we witnessed. And sometimes that deeply affects the way we assume life is supposed to be. Whereas again, when we look at the way Islam proposes things, we might find there's a contrast, sometimes a very deep one, right? Again, another good example of this is how one is supposed to raise their children. We might have had one experience in the household, right, where parents might have reacted in a particular way. Now I come to Islam, I find it's a very different perspective, right? How I'm supposed to deal with arguments and conflict. That's one thing you find in the household and in our childhood, the experiences we've had it. And then the way Islam tells us to deal with these issues. So there is, in what I want to get across is this: there's a lot going on if you lift up this hood of your character and you start to study yourself. And many of us might assume that this is something that doesn't have much to do with Islam, whereas it has a lot to do with Islam fundamentally, in the sense that Islam wants you to do that. Islam wants you to study yourself and see this frustration that I have, where is it coming from? This, for example, insecurity that I have, that sometimes shows itself as arrogance, interestingly enough. Sometimes it shows itself as jealousy. Sometimes it shows itself as envy, and a number of different attributes. Where are these coming from, right? And sometimes, not always, but sometimes they are coming from the experiences that I had as a child. Maybe I have to go back and unlearn some of these experiences that I had. And that's where counselors and other professionals come into the picture. So I won't go into too much depth and detail there. That's why we have Sister Sukaina with us today. So she'll inshallah go more into depth and detail there. I just wanted to convey this point that the fundamentals of this concept is something that we already find within Islam. Of course, science today, counselors today, professionals today, they will guide us more in terms of the details of how this process can be done. How can someone take a look under the hood and kind of see what's going on? And in that process, they might find an explanation for many of the different characteristics that they had, maybe that they were not even aware of up to that point.
Thank you so much, Sheikh. It's very important to know how Islam is actually telling us that we should study ourselves first before we are approaching our children and let out our frustrations out on them, which may or may not relate to our past experiences. Now I would like to invite Sister Sukaina Taver to speak to us about this topic.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Sukaina Thawar, and I'm a conscious parenting coach. I live in Dubai, and I have 3 children. I shouldn't say children because now they are adults. I have a 21-year-old daughter, a 19-year-old daughter, and a 17-year-old son. So I understand the pain points that parents go through, and parenting is always challenging because children are going to push your buttons. And that's when my journey actually started 8 years ago, when one of my kids started rebelling. And this kid of mine was not ready to listen to whatever I was saying. So I could see that I'm doing something terribly wrong. And I decided, okay, let's take a look in the mirror. What's wrong? What is happening here? Why is my child not listening to me? I must be doing something wrong. And I started a deep dive into looking at my flaws. How can I do things differently? It took me around 2 years to establish the relationship that was already on the rocks, because, you know, there was a lot of judgment from me, criticism from me, maybe punishments from me. So I was a very strict parent. And I could see that all those no's that I was using are not getting me anywhere. However, I learned through conscious parenting, things can be done in a different way. I learned to see children as sovereign beings and understand that I see the spirit, I respect the child, I honor the child, and I love the child unconditionally. Children are not mean. They are here and they are here to teach us spiritual lessons. Whenever you struggle in parenting, you need to have a look back at what am I doing wrong? Because children are not mean spirited. They are not here to hurt you, at least intentionally not, right? They are here to learn from you. So as a conscious parent, you have to model good behavior. That was missing totally from my paradigm. You know, I was very strict and punitive and judgmental and criticizing. And then things started changing as I started learning. So one of the things that I talk about, and I'll start screen sharing, is how to heal your inner child wounds. So I will explain to you what it means by that, all right? So in my first talk, I talked about what is the inner child. So inner child is something that is created when we are very little. Between the ages of 0 to 7, we receive our belief systems and they are stored in our subconscious mind. Between 0 to 7, children don't know even how to question you much. Children are creative, they're curious, and they learn everything from their environment. Like they are like sponges. So they absorb from the parents, from the community, from their teachers, and they are just busy learning by observing. So we have to be careful between 0 to 7 how we deal with our kids, because whatever we are facing right now as parents, and I'd like to reiterate that Sheikh said this, that we are stuck in patterns. Maybe currently you are struggling to communicate with your child or to connect with your child because you are stuck in a pattern. Now, to cut that pattern, to do things differently, we have to understand where we are going wrong. Our subconscious mind, which is our mind of preference, we use it 95% of the time in a day. We only use 5% of our conscious mind. So I'll talk about how to deal with our inner child wounds because we did not have conscious parents. So we were not validated, we were not seen, maybe we were not heard. Maybe some of the needs were not met because there are multiple needs. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Do I matter? Do you love me? These are the needs of a child. If these were not met correctly, which is possible because parents are not mean, but or they don't intend anything evil, but they are human beings and we all have flaws. But how can we deal with our feelings and look at what is missing in this parenting journey, which we find very challenging? So, how to feel our feelings? When I talk about feelings, I mean your inner child wounds. All right. So, we have to sit with our feelings and do our inner child work. All right. But before we do that, we have to understand one thing very well, which is you can't go just deep dive and deal with your inner child wounds because you need to have the skill set. Because if you do that, then you will be flooded because your psyche can be depressed, repressed, suppressed, your emotions when you were younger, when it was actually too much for you to process. So we can disassociate from these feelings and we can split off from these feelings. We can fragment away those memories. We were doing that because it was too much for our nervous system, and nothing just happens arbitrarily. It happens for an important reason, and that is to protect us. It doesn't mean that we are adults, so I have the skill set maybe to access those difficult feelings and emotions. So today I'd like to talk about we have to be careful if we are going to deconstruct this. And if we want to do this, then it's a skill. You have to build the skill like a muscle, right? If we go to the gym, we're just not going to lift heavy weights on the first day. You go day by day, nudge by nudge. So the inner child work that we need to do, we just can't jump into deep dive into healing ourselves because we have to understand what it is actually first. So as I was saying, this is a skill. So if you want to learn swimming, so I'll use this example and explain to you. If you want to learn swimming, you buy a bathing suit, then you get a coach, then you go to the coach, and then one day they'll make you dip your toes in the water. Then you'll go to the knee deep water. Slowly and gradually you will progress in the pool. You will learn to swim. Then you'll go to the deep end and then you will learn to dive. So it's a skill. You do not want to do this work, especially if you have had a traumatic childhood or if you have had complex PTSD and difficult things that have happened to you in your childhood already have left you feeling dysregulated. So I will give you an example again. The same thing as I told you, whether you're learning swimming, going to the gym, learning to horse ride, whatever you are trying to do, you need to understand that this process of healing yourself can be difficult. So you need to understand that if you are feeling like this, what I'm going to explain to you further, that means that if you're already feeling stressed and overwhelmed, if you start doing this work, you will just flood yourself. And if you don't have good emotional regulation skills, emotional regulation is very important. One of the key components of emotional intelligence. So how can I bring myself down? And in a state of homeostasis, right? How can I bring myself down to calm down? That's what I mean by homeostasis, right? So there is a term coined by Dan Siegel. Dr. Dan Siegel talks about this, and he talks about window of tolerance. Okay, and it's a term used by Dr. Dan Siegel, commonly used to understand and describe normal brain-body reactions, especially following adversity. The concept suggests that we have an optimal arousal level when we are within the window of tolerance that allows for ebb and flow, that means up and down of emotion experienced by human beings. We may experience hurt, anxiety, pain, anger that brings us close to the edges of the window of tolerance. But generally, we are able to utilize strategies to keep us within this window. Similarly, we may feel too exhausted, sad, or shut down, but we generally shift out of this. So below will be a diagram where I'll be showing you the demonstration of ebb and flow of an optimally regulated nervous system experiencing activation followed by settling. Right? So you can see here is the nervous system. All right. There is an arousal activation, sympathetic, and then you can see once you settle, you go to parasympathetic. And this is the normal range that a healthy nervous system is supposed to go through. But we have to understand if we have had lots of childhood baggage, right? So how much can you tolerate? If you have had a difficult childhood, then maybe, you know what, emotional regulation is very challenging for you, right? A lot of men who were not socialized in this way of emotions and learning emotional vocabulary or talking about emotions, they were not taught just to get on, they were just taught to get on with it. So they were not taught how to feel their feelings, right? So they don't know how to access that, right? And women have oxytocin, which men don't have. So women, for women, it's like easier to self-regulate to a certain degree. All right, so men get flooded very quickly. Children, those children who have cognitive, abilities, who don't have cognitive abilities, who don't have verbal abilities yet, right? So they are still not talking. It's hard for them to express their emotions. So that's why you'll see the little kids, 2-year-olds, 3 years old, they can go into a tantrum and it's hard for them to calm down. So as a parent, you have to learn to self-regulate and understand you are going to model that for the kids. You are the surrogate window to help the children calm down, to soothe their surrogate nervous system. So when we are overwhelmed, then our children will get overwhelmed. Our window develops through different experiences. So if you have difficult childhood experiences, then you will have a small window of tolerance. The bigger window of tolerance, how do you achieve this? So let's say you had a healthy childhood, somewhat healthy childhood, where your parent maybe took you to a therapist maybe every 3 months, and you learned how to cope with your stress with different things, right? Like doing exercise and learning to journal, learning to calm down yourself, right? And then what happens is with these exercises, staying with a therapist, learning to co-regulate, when co-regulation happens, you start understanding that you are growing your window of tolerance. So if a stressor comes and you are already having better skills, you know how to deal with your emotions, then you will grow your window. There will be times when you will be stressed and your window of tolerance can shrink, all right? And it can be small. So it can throw you either above the window or below the window. What do I mean by that? All right. So I will explain to you when we reach that slide. So my advice would be, how do you self-regulate? You have to understand that when we are going through emotions, there are different things we can do to self-regulate. Maybe we were not taught this. So, right, I teach this. When the parents are angry, I tell them, take the pause. Why do I tell them to take the pause? Because when you are in emotional brain, your amygdala is already active and your prefrontal cortex is out of, process. Because when you are really mad, let's say when you are in rage, you can never make a good decision. So I always tell the parents, take the pause, take that pause of 90 seconds, breathe in, breathe out, practice calming down. All right, just hold your self for 90 seconds, breathe in, breathe out, connect with your breath. So you let the feeling pass, because the feelings of anger or any other emotion which is disturbing only takes 90 seconds. If you can hold yourself for a few seconds, 90 seconds breathing, and you will be able to self-regulate. Of course, you should sit with your emotions and learn how to deal with your emotions and learn the language of emotions. What are your emotions, how to sit with them. But if you have had a difficult childhood, then I would not suggest you to do that. Because if you start opening those memories which are very hard and you are in hyper arousal, or if you are extremely stressed out already and you go to your inner child wounds alone, then you'll be flooded, and you don't want to do that. So in a day, we go through stressful moments, right? But we also know how to self-regulate. So self-regulation, when it happens, is called you go to hyperactive and then you come back to calm arousal, which is an ideal state that most of the times during the day, we fluctuate within various levels of calm arousal. However, when we become overstimulated with fear, pain, anger, trauma, to the degree that it pushes us outside of the window of the tolerance, then it's called hyperarousal. So I'm going to show you an image. This is the window of tolerance. So there is hyperarousal and there is something called hypoarousal. So what is hyperarousal? It's characterized by excessive activation, often in the form of anxiety, panic, fear, hypervigilance, in a form of anxiety, etc. Right? This keeps our system stuck on, and it impacts our ability to relax, often making it difficult to sleep, eat, or digest food, and optimally managing our emotions at the most intensified level. This may result in dissociative rage and hostility. So if I've had a good window of tolerance, but what happens is when I'm pushed out, so if a big stressor comes, I can be pushed above the window of tolerance, which is called hyperarousal. I'll be pushed out of the window of tolerance, and you may go through hyperarousal. And this is the side of fight or flight, panic, and hyperarousal, where your system is overwhelmed, overworked, just switched on, hypervigilant, and it's a big stressor that pushed you there. All right. So you find it hard to cope. All right. Because now you are dysregulated. You're already in hyperactive mode, right? You are in hypervigilance now, hyperarousal. Too much fight or flight can change your brain chemistry and can send you to hypoarousal. What do I mean by that? I would like to explain to you what does hypoarousal mean. Hypoarousal may occur when you have too much hyperarousal, suppressing the pain, emotional overwhelm, or our body and brain and body is not able to tolerate, causing us to plunge into a state of hypoarousal, shutting down or disassociating. In this state, our system can become stuck off, characterized by exhaustion, depression, flat affect, numbness, disassociation, and disconnection. This too impacts our sleep, in that we may not want to sleep all the time, or we want to sleep all the time. So either you become restless and don't sleep, or you will sleep all the time. This impacts our appetite, digestion, as well as it may make you feel emotionally deadened. So when you go through fight, flight, fight, flight, fight, flight over and over again, which is usually the case, many of us are in fight or flight most of the time. You know, we're just busy doing one thing after the other. So too much fight or flight, then it will send your nervous system suddenly to freeze. When you start feeling numb, disassociated from your difficult emotions, you can actually feel quite apathetic, quite depressed, and you can have flat affect. That's how you enter a state of hypoarousal. All right, so you can go either way, right? You can go to hyperarousal or hypoarousal. So how many of you, if you can write in the window, chat windows, please, how many of you think are in hyperarousal? If you can relate to this, everyone. If you are in hyperarousal, then I want you to write 1. And if you are in hypoarousal, I want you to write 2. All right, I can see 1, 2. Okay, all right. Just quickly, just because I want to point out something. All right, so I can see lots of 1s as well. And those who are in 2, that means you have been a lot of times in fight or flight. And hence the reason being, after fight or flight, you will go to freeze, right? So let's continue. So you see, when we are too long in fight or flight, we will go to hypoarousal, which is being totally numb. How can we stop this? How can we stop this from happening? We have to learn to look after ourselves, right? We have stopped looking after ourselves. We have to do self-regulation. We have poor diet. We have poor sleep. Maybe we don't do lots of exercise. We have to do at least minimum thrice a week. We need to do exercise. We could do yoga, go for walks. Yeah. Looking after ourselves, self-care, spiritual self-care, psychological self-care, emotional self-care, and physical self-care. All these things really matter. So we are in calm mode, cool mode, connected mode, but we are so busy in hyper arousal that we are busy, either we are having anxiety, we are overwhelmed, we are having such a stressful life, you are busy doing. So then one thing after the other, our children are in three different, let's say maybe extracurricular activities. I'm having a job, I have to look after my house, children, cooking, too much going on. So then we are always in either, anger mode, overwhelmed, anxious. So hyperarousal has many symptoms. You'll see rigidness, right? And then we want to cope with this because now all this anxiety and fight or flight, we need to do something to feel better. So our coping mechanism would look like overeating or over dieting. We can have addictive behaviors as well, right? We could be having addiction. I mean, even as I say addiction, I talk about like social media addiction. You could be addicted to overeating, over talking. Yeah, you're very hyper. So that is fight or flight, right? So how can we reduce this hyper arousal? What can we do to slow down, right? The best thing is breath work, right? But I will go through the details and explain to you. So if you're in hyperarousal, what can you do to calm down? Drinking water from a straw, throwing a therapy yoga ball. So staying on the ball and doing exercises, rolling the ball on your stomach, rolling the ball with your back, right? Jumping on the trampoline. You want to bring the energy down. So when you start doing exercise, remember that we are energy beings. If we are in fight or flight, we need to calm ourselves down. So we need to move our body. We need to do the breath work, do some meditation, learn to breathe properly, because if you are in fight or flight, you are tensed, you are not even breathing properly, right? Then there is something here I have written, which is shaking or stomping. So if you see animals, if you see a dog, if he is in fight or flight, he will start shaking himself to bring himself back to homeostasis, to become calm. So shaking helps, right? Stomping, shaking, as I said, different kind of exercises, heavy work. So if you are going to the gym, you have so many options, right? Lifting, pulling, push-ups, wheelbarrow, races, crab walk, leapfrog, all these exercises can bring hyper arousal down, right? So for soothing, you could do Muslim meditation. There are lots of Muslim meditations out there. One of the websites is muslimmeditation.com, where you can do dhikr of Allah and bring calmness to your heart by one of the names of Allah that you choose, and then bring that noor in your heart and calm yourself down and bring yourself into self-regulation. Comforting foods. Sometimes when you feel very much down, it's good to have hot chocolate, because that's going to create endorphins and calm you down, right? Weighted blanket, warm water. These are important things, especially if you are in hyperarousal. Because when you're in hyperarousal, you'll find it very hard to fall asleep, because there's a lot of adrenaline and cortisol being pushed into your body. So falling asleep is a very big task for those people who are in hyperarousal, because now, even if you are in hypoarousal for that matter, because hyperarousal takes you to fight or flight, and then you have cortisol and adrenaline pumping in your system, falling asleep is an issue. So my suggestion would be, please get a weighted blanket, which is very good because it will create earthing and grounding, because a weighted blanket is heavy. So it will make you feel like somebody is hugging you, and it helps you calm down, and that will help you self-regulate, right? So cortisol is a stress hormone produced when your body is under stress, and it's a part of fight or flight response. But you don't have to be in a life-threatening situation to go through fight or flight. For human beings, just an anxious thought or a worrying thought will put you in fight or flight. Subhanallah, how Allah has made us that just by a triggering thought, it could be something sad that happened to you, maybe in your childhood, Or maybe as a teenager, if somebody is going through bullying, and if your child just starts thinking about the bully might not be even physically present, they will go through fight or flight. So we can trigger fight or flight just by a thought. So we have to understand, we have to start earthing and grounding. How you can do that, I'll explain you further.
Sorry,
So
excuse me, Sister Sakina.
yes.
There's a question from the audience asking, one specific question is asking, being a physician, my job is very stressful, but still seems to be calm. Does involving in other activities one is interested in, would that increase window of tolerance?
Yes, definitely. Yes, because sitting with yourself is what we are talking about. Why are we talking about this? This that's happening to us, whether it's hyperarousal or hypoarousal, is happening to us because we have a very stressful life. We are human beings, but we are always doing. We are not human doings. So we need to take a chill pill. We need to do things that will calm us down. So how can we calm ourselves down? As we said, we could use a weighted blanket. All right. Then how about if you are in hypoarousal? So we had some twos in our checkbox as I checked, right? So some people have been, unfortunately, for such a long time, maybe 6 months, they were anxious, or they were going through this hyper arousal. So then they went to hypoarousal. Now they have completely zoned out. They feel numb, they feel frozen, they feel depressed and shut down. How can you change this? So there are certain activities that you can do that can bring you out of this hypoarousal. What can you do? Aromatherapy is one of the best things that you can do, right? And in Islam, as we know, we are recommended to put perfume, and how we know about the Prophet. Yeah, so perfume can be a very, very healing thing. Try to do aromatherapy, because this will really help you, right? Having crunchy food, using sensory shaker. So this is like sensory toys, right? Movement, again, movement, whether you are hyper or hypo, try putting in exercise in your daily routine. If you can't do anything like going to the gym, just a simple half an hour walk. Connect to nature, very important. Again, jumping on the trampoline is going to help us. Why? Because we have unresolved emotions stored in our body. Now remember, we are energy beings, so we need to move. When we start moving, the energy is going to shift. Yeah, you move it to lose it. You move so you can move the energy that is stuck. We have energy meridians. So we have unresolved emotion. Maybe we have anger, we have aggression, we have something which is sadness, and we are holding this within our meridians. So when we start moving our body, this will help the energy to move. So one of the things that you can do for hypoarousal is a rocking chair. A very good thing to do is sit on a rocking chair. All right. Again, weighted blanket is for both hyper and hypoarousal. And so blowing bubbles through the straw, and definitely listening to Quran can help us heal. We want to ask Allah to heal us. So if we listen to Quran and just focus 10 minutes or 5 minutes a day, just tuning in into the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can help us calm down. So how can we make things better? Self-regulation is very, very important. De-stressing, decompression, regulation. When I talk about regulation, I mean about body work. How can you help your nervous system calm down? How can you do that? As I said, you can do lots of exercise, incorporate exercise, start journaling, learn to calm yourself down through different ways. All right, grounding exercises. Go for a walk on the beach. Make sure you are not wearing your shoes, so your legs are on the sand. You want grounding to happen, right? So you connect to nature, and then you can get self-regulation. What happens to us on a daily basis? We are busy in front of a laptop, we have our phones, we are on social media, we are constantly bombarded by, radiation. So these grounding activities will help us calm down. It will bring us back to our center. That's why I talk about having a walk in nature. Go to the beach, go to the park, walk barefooted. This is very important because you want grounding to take place. Do aromatherapy, connect to nature, appreciate what you see, and this will bring you back to the center. We were created from earth, so we need to understand when we walk on this sand, We need to connect ourselves. So when you are walking on this set, ask Mother Earth, give me what I need, calm me down. Self regulation can only happen if we connect to earth. We learn to move our bodies, do breath work, so do yoga. So these are different solutions that I'm suggesting. You can do any one of them, or two or three, especially hot chocolate. I'm sure all of you love hot chocolate, and you will not say no to that. At least before you go to sleep, if you have a nice half an hour before you go to bed, if you have some hot chocolate, it will really calm you down, right? So I don't want to bore you with more information, but remember one thing I'll tell you, whether you're in hyperarousal or hypoarousal, the body cannot stay here for long. We are created in such a way that you will move, whether you're in hyper or hypo. You cannot be stuck here forever. You'll be stuck for some time, but then the body will start ways to move you towards healing. So it will also happen naturally. So let's say you are in hypoarousal and you don't feel like going swimming or going for a walk, but suddenly one day you will feel like painting, or you'll feel like doing something that was your hobby as a child. Why is this happening? Because God has made us self-preserving. The brain is not dead. It wants you to go on. It wants you to self-regulate. So something will happen if you are not taking the effort. God has created us in such a beautiful way that you will not shut down and become deadened, like forever stay in either hypoarousal or hyperarousal. Something will happen and you will move your body. Something will happen and you will do something differently. And then you will self-regulate. Hopefully you are not in a very traumatic state. So if you are not a PTSD patient, you can go through hypo, and you will eventually come to self-regulation, even if you have not made any conscious effort. So I would usually suggest people to do breath work. Very important. Yeah. If you know the yoga, or if you are doing pranayam, learn to do breathing exercises. If you can't do anything because of your tight schedule, sit down, do the meditation, right? Because it will help you through all these things. Anger issues, anxiety, depression, grief, chronic pain. You want to self-regulate. And the fastest way to do that is through breath work. How can you do that? There are multiple ways. Just write breathwork on Google and you shall find it, right? I don't want to take too much of your time, but you can
Right,
do.
Sister Sukaina,
Yes.
there is a question from Sister Afra. Um, please unmute yourself, Sister Afra. Yes.
Yes, so I just wanted to ask, I understand there's a tight schedule that we have, but with kids and a lot of things, how can we just make a brief time for ourselves for meditation? What is a quick way of doing that?
Okay, so you can just sit in silence for 5 minutes, but I prefer guided meditation. That's why I recommended muslimmeditation.com, right? Just sitting in silence, 5 minutes. Even if you are laying down in bed, let's say you wake up at 5 o'clock and 5:30, and you pray at 5:15 or 5:10, whatever you prayed, and then just, or before you pray, just when you wake up, just wake up 5 minutes before, sit in silence. And if you can't do anything, let's say sitting in silence is the best way. But when you are sitting in silence, you will have the brain, you'll have thoughts coming in. So you are busy, everything I understand, but you can spare 10 or 15 minutes a day for yourself, whether you are doing it before sleeping at night or you are waking up early in the morning. You can give yourself 15 minutes. You can start journaling, 5 minutes, do journaling. Just write how you feel. Pour your heart out in your journal. Why am I saying this? Because if you do not process your emotions, you are bound to act out and react when your child is going to push your buttons, right? As you said, you have a tight schedule. You have to drive to school, you have to go to work, you have to do so many chores, but you can spend 10 minutes for yourself. You deserve that, right? Because you are an amazing parent. You are doing your best. So 10 minutes a day is going to make you sane. At least you are not going to lose your temper. Or even if you're about to lose it, at least you'll be conscious about what you're doing and you'll be able to self-regulate quickly. But this is something I'm telling you that you have to practice. It doesn't happen overnight. Now, let's say if you are really in a bad situation, right? Let's say if you have PTSD, right? If you have had a very bad childhood, unfortunately, because sometimes parents were punitive, they were maybe hitting us, or they were giving us very bad punishments. Maybe you were put in a storeroom which was dark. So these are memories which are traumatic, and you are afraid to even touch them. So I would suggest, don't do your inner child work on your own. If you are going through a lot of hyperarousal or hypoarousal, and you feel that you are so dysregulated, right, you need to go to a therapist, right? Use a coach, use a therapist. I'm available. Or if you have anyone nearby, wherever you are, right, you can go to a therapist. Why I'm suggesting you should go to a therapist? I don't want you to get overwhelmed going into your inner child wounds and getting overwhelmed, and then you will feel more terrible. So if you are in hyperarousal, and if you start doing your work on your own, and you can go to hypoarousal then. So it's better to do the work with a therapist if you feel you are too much in fight or flight, or you are already in, in a situation where you are in hypoarousal, and you don't want to touch those memories which are so painful. Sit with a therapist. Why am I suggesting this? Because there is something called co-regulation. You will learn to deal with your issues with a therapist. So once a month, you can go to either a psychologist, or you can go to a coach who can help you self regulate. When you learn to talk about your past, you will understand that you can deal with these issues. You'll be able to talk about it, then it will come out of your system. We have stored trauma in our bodies. Okay, we have stored trauma, we have stored all these negative energies. That's why I'm suggesting, if you want to do it on your own, then I have given you simple solutions. Buy a weighted blanket, do some exercise, go walking, all right? Make sure you are barefooted. That's why I gave you all these solutions, which are doable. All of you can do it. Just find some time for yourself. You are special. And if you don't want to, repeat a generational pattern, as Sheikh was saying, right? You don't want to repeat the patterns that happened with you. If you are a conscious parent, you have to break the cycle. The only way you can do that is if you are mindful. You have to then, in order to self regulate, look after yourself. It's your diet, it's your sleep, it is your, so just self care. Basically, look after yourself, love yourself, don't be so hard on yourself. That's what we do. We are busy serving everyone, but what happens is we are not looking after ourselves, and then because of being overworked, we are going to be triggered, and then we are going to lose it with our children. So I already mentioned this. So one of the things that I wanted to mention is, remember, all right, whenever you are dealing with your children, if you are using warm touch, warm face, warm voice, their amygdala is going to be activated. They will feel safe. You can only do warm touch, warm face, warm voice all the time, every day, if you have done self-care. What you have to do, I've already told you, but this is one of the things that I wanted to mention, that children need a safety environment. They'll only feel safe if you are not losing your temper, if you are not projecting, not blaming them, not shaming them, not punishing them, and seeing them as sovereign beings, and they deserve the best parent. They deserve a calm parent. They are children. They don't know how to self-regulate. You have to model it for them. And hence, it's vital and very important that you do your work. All right? On that note, um, I have to only say this much, and that you have to understand, like you have a physical wound, it takes 6 weeks to heal. Your inner child wounds are from your childhood. It takes time. So you have to put in the effort, right? Like a physical injury takes time to heal. Be gentle with yourself. Do journaling, go to support groups, right? Find a friend, somebody whom you can confide in, right? So you can pour your heart out. You need to take it out of your system. So be gentle with yourself, love yourself, find a support group, do journaling. And you know what? It will take some time. How long? I'll tell you, minimum it takes 3 months. But don't stop healing yourself. You want to be present with your children. You want to heal yourself. So you are a mindful parent and not a reactive parent. You want to respond to your children and not project and react. So remember, if you do this work, it will take some time, but eventually you will heal yourself, and you will be a better parent, present all the time with your children, and they will love you for this, because you will have a, what do you say, a beautiful relationship whereby you understand that you are the guide of your children. Your children are not your guides. They are your guides in a certain degree, meaning they will show you the way. The child is triggering you. What is he trying to tell you or she trying to tell you? Be more patient, right? So we are adults. We need to take this step of healing ourselves and understanding that we cannot hold nothing should hold us back from healing ourselves. We should heal ourselves, be loving towards ourselves, be compassionate towards yourself, do your healing work, and inshallah you will be more present. And understand, strive for courage, not for fearlessness. Understand one thing, that this is life. You can't be tough on yourself. Just be there for yourself, because if you want to be a conscious parent, then you have to be doing your inner child work. And on that note, I am done with my talk for today. Thank you very much, all of you, for listening and being patient with me.
Thank you so much, Sister Sukaina, for that wonderful seminar on healing our inner child wounds. We have a couple of questions from the audience.
Sure.
One question is, what about suppressed and forgotten memories, but are still in our subconscious, affecting us now in adulthood, that needs to be addressed?
All right. So yeah, so this is trauma. You know what happens when you go through a traumatic experience, and it is really scary because trauma is unresolved trauma. So what happens is it blocks your memories. So the person cannot access their painful experience. So now they need a therapist. One of the things I would suggest is if you have an RTT therapist near you, wherever you are, okay, RTT is Rapid Transformational Therapy. I would suggest that's a quick fix. So what I was telling you is something you need to do on your own, right? So I suggested walking, I said do exercise, have hot chocolate, jump on the trampoline. Now these are simple things, but if you have trauma stored, that means you need more work to deal with it. How are you going to heal yourself? So a simplest solution I would give is look for a rapid transformational therapy. And I'm currently doing this course, and it is hypnotherapy, where the therapist will take you in your childhood. So you go through regression. And remember, I said that everything is stored in your subconscious mind, right? So these memories are stored in your subconscious mind. So what the therapist will do is they will take you to your childhood, and you will remember exactly what happened to you, because the therapist will help you remember. The blocked memories will be unblocked. And what will happen is they will do the cure for you while you are in hypnotherapy. So it takes around 1 hour for this therapy to take place. And what will happen is you will be able to see where the trauma happened, how it happened. She will make you do something called dialogue with the hurter. So now the parents, if they did something to you, they were never meaning to be so mean to you. They were just reactive. They didn't know anything better. So you have a dialogue with the hurter where you take the role of your parent and understand the parent loved you. They didn't mean to punish you. So you do forgiveness work there, and you learn to let go of this trauma that's holding you back. Now, this is a healing process. Once you do this one session with the RTT therapist, you will be getting a recording and you will listen to it for 3 weeks. So day and night, you listen to that, because remember, the brain learns through repetition. When you get this audio clip, you're going to listen to it night and day. For after 21 days, there'll be a shift. Why? Because this trauma is stored in your subconscious mind. So the belief system, the limiting belief which is holding you back, maybe I'm not enough, or I'm different, or whatever it is that is scaring you, whether it's a phobia or anger or whatever, hatred towards what happened in your childhood, you will let go in therapy. And with this process of listening to the recording, you will heal yourself, inshallah. I have seen this in my own life with one of the members of my family who had psychosomatic disorder. So these are serious conditions that I'm talking about, right? So if you feel you're really stuck, then I would like to give this advice. Go to our RTT therapist, and sometimes you would need one session, and sometimes you might need 2 or 3. But you know what? This is the easiest way to remove trauma from your subconscious mind. And inshallah, Allah will help you heal, so you are a better version of yourself, and you can be there for your children and give them unconditional love without being triggered with your traumatic experiences, inshallah.
Sheikh, there's also a question for you. There are actually several more questions for you, Sister Sukina. But first, Sheikh, can you answer this? Are there any hadith describing how to control anger?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We have to understand, of course, Islam is the religion of Islam, as even though we would like for Islam to get into all of these details and tell us exactly what we're supposed to do in every single situation, that's not the role that Islam has played when it comes to our akhlaqi attributes. The role that Islam plays gives us a framework to work with, tells us what are the tools, generally speaking, that are okay for us to use. Some things are not okay for us to use, so we're going to set those aside. Some things are okay for us to use. Then what works for us and what doesn't work for us, Islam doesn't get necessarily into those details. But one of those details that, interestingly enough, is mentioned, we're discussing the book of Imam Khomeini, 40 Ahadith of Imam al-Khomeini, where he talks about different akhlaqi attributes. So when he comes to anger, he does talk about the idea of changing your physical position. This is mentioned in a number of hadith, actually. So that is one detail that comes to my mind. But other than that, it really, like I said at the very beginning, and this kind of goes, hand in hand with what Sister Sukaina was talking about. It's really important to study yourself. This is something I don't see happening, unfortunately, in our communities. It's not something that we are taught to do. You have to understand who you are. What are the things that trigger you? Every person is different. You might have, for example, an insecurity. Like, someone messaged me not too long ago. They said, well, Sheikh, I struggle with anger. What am I supposed to do? Well, every person is different. What is the root of that anger? What are those situations where you get triggered? Sometimes it's interesting. You'll find, for example, an insecurity that you have is triggering this anger. You might look at it outwardly as as a symptom of, oh, I'm an angry person. In reality, when you look at it, you go a bit deeper, you find that, oh, it's a particular sentiment or a particular statement. When this statement is made about me, for example, I get very angry. I get very frustrated because, for example, when this person says this, I automatically assume this is what they're saying, and they're pointing to this flaw of mine that I've had for 20 years now, and now they know about this flaw of mine, and then you get more angry, you get more frustrated. So to answer this question, I think studying yourself is a very important step in this regard, to see what is it that triggers that anger that you have. Then Islam, of course, is there to help you with that, right? So, for example, my frustration, for example, might be with me feeling like I have a lack of control over a situation. That's the reason why a lot of people get frustrated. That's where your tawakkul is supposed to come into the picture and try to help you with that. Or maybe it's an insecurity that I have. That's where, again, the Islamic perspective is supposed to come in and help you to understand. One thing that I found helps as well is asking others about some of the insecurities that you have. For example, I might feel like I'm a person who lacks in a certain area. Well, let me ask some of my close friends and see, do I really lack in this area, or is this simply the way I see myself? Right? Sometimes you ask others, say, no, you're completely fine in this field of life. You're completely fine in this aspect of life. So my point was, Islam doesn't get too deep into the details. That's where our work comes into the picture. Like Sister Kane was saying, we have to study ourselves and see what are those tools that helps us. I remember I was part of a Q&A. One of the great scholars, someone asked him, he said, what is the special dhikr I'm supposed to say when I get angry? And I want to be sure I don't say anything, God forbid, disrespectful, God forbid, offensive to the people who are around me, my family, my children. And that scholar very beautifully used to say, there's no dhikr, but the one thing you're supposed to do is supposed to take your lips and push them up against one another very, very hardly, right? In other words, what he was trying to say was that in that moment, right, maybe you just stay away from saying things, particularly in that moment. The point I'm trying to make is that might work for one person. For a different person, it might work in a different way. It only comes through studying yourself that you're able to understand what is it that works for you in particular.
Thank you, Sheikh. Okay, Sister Sukaina, a question for you. So if natural regulation is going to happen anyway, do we still need to do something for hypo or hyper states?
Yes, definitely. See, we can't wait for nature to do its thing. So if you are not feeling good, whether you are in hyper, because this is not a homeostasis, you are not in a calm place. So what happens if you are in hyper arousal? Constantly cortisol and adrenaline are being produced, then you're not going to feel zen, you're not going to feel happy. You are doing your chores, but you are just plodding along in life. You're not mindful, right? So checking in with yourself is so important, right? We are praying for so many years, but we are told to make long sajdas. Why is that? Because it helps us ground ourselves, right? Grounding, it's not only just walking on the beach. You do long sajdas. You could do a shukr sajda of 5 minutes where you are grounding and you are going to just help yourself self-regulate, because I said, we are in front of a screen, whether it's a laptop or a phone, we are constantly having radiation. So grounding helps. Doing long sajda, why wait for us to go naturally there? Whether you're in hypo or hyper, you are not self-regulated. That means if you are in hypoarousal, you'll not be able to relate to your child. What happens in hypo? You cannot actually validate or empathize with your child because you are already dysregulated. You cannot relate to what is happening to your toddler. Let's say your child is crying. You will not even feel empathy because you are in hypoarousal. So your feelings are deadened. You can't feel what your child is feeling. So you can't empathize or sympathize. So why wait for nature to do its work? Because it will take long. You don't know when the switch will happen. Help yourself to be more present, heal yourself so you feel better. And waiting for it to happen, who knows when it will happen? So you could be in hypoarousal for 6 months and you cannot relate to anything. You will not feel happy. There's a birthday in the house, you cannot smile because you don't feel anything. You literally feel out of the body experience. It's a very weird experience if you have ever gone through hypoarousal. So I'll give you an example. I'm having thyroid, right? So I go through hyper and hypothyroidism, right? So if I go through something just with hormones, I'm talking about thyroid hormones. If you have hyperthyroidism, you know what you feel. You're actually going through a hyper state. You'll be doing everything fast, talking fast, walking fast, everything fast. But if you have hypothyroidism, then you're going to do everything slow, just because your thyroid is not functioning at a correct level, right? So the same thing goes here. If you heal yourself, if you're in hyperactive, hyper state, then you are going to just be reactive. And if you're in hypo, you'll feel nothing. So in both ways, I think you are in a losing situation for your child, because when you start healing, not only will you be a better version of yourself, you'll be more introspective. We want muhasiba, muraqaba, starting your day with a good intention and in understanding that introspection is very important, right? What does Imam Ali say? His hadith is there. Every day has to be different, right? We cannot live a pattern. So if you are stuck in hyper, you cannot better yourself unless you take some effort every day to work towards the goal of self-regulation, because that's very important.
Okay, thank you, Sister Sakina. The next question is, do you recommend a space in the home to meditate?
Well, you can meditate in your own bedroom, but if you want a special place, maybe prayer room would be a best idea, right? Because where we pray to Allah, the energy is very different over there, right? It's a special place. I have a prayer room in the house. When somebody feels off, they just sit in the prayer room. You could do dhikr of Allah. You could just be in the shukr sajda for 5 minutes, or just don't say anything. Pour your heart out to Allah in the sajda. You can't do anything. Just go to sajda and talk to Allah like He's your best friend. Tell Him how you feel. And that will help because you are grounding yourself. Your head is on the more and you are talking to Allah. You are venting, you are taking it out. It's important. As I said, unresolved emotions get stored in the body and then it manifests as physical elements. That's when we get now, women, we have thyroid issues, we have fibroid issues, we have migraine issues, we have other things. Why is this happening? Because we never were taught to feel our feelings. If we learn to feel our feelings, then the energy in your body is flowing. So then you will feel better and zen, and you will not get physical problems that you are going through, whether it's migraine or whatever it is that it is manifesting as.
Okay, we still have a couple more questions, but we are going over on time. So I do think we should conclude
Sure,
now.
it's up to you. If you want one more, then I don't mind.
I think we can, if we can just go through them quickly, and then you know, when we answer, we can inshallah do it in a more compressed way, so we can finish them inshallah.
Okay, one last question for Sheikh. Is hypnosis allowed in Islam?
Yeah, so that's a great question. You'll find scholars have approached this in a little bit of a cautious manner. So in and of itself, there doesn't seem to be a problem with it. Okay, if it helps with someone in their particular situation, then in and of itself, it's not a problem. You have to understand that, you know, when scholars answer this question, they have to be very careful, because, you know, when you talk about a concept in and of itself versus the way that it is utilized within society, sometimes they're two very different things, right? Especially back home, you know, this has become in many ways a place where a lot of people are taking advantage of, and, you know, things of that nature. So we have to be a little bit careful about that. But the ruling itself is no, in and of itself, there doesn't seem to be a problem in that regard. So I think that should answer the question, inshallah.
Okay, thank you. And Sister Sukaina, how can I encourage my adult married son to see a psychologist to download his inner child because he is suffering?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't get you.
So the question is, how can I encourage my adult married son to visit a psychotherapist or psychologist? It's the same question answered twice.
Okay.
To download his inner child with traumas because he is suffering.
Okay, so I'll just say something. You cannot convince somebody to do their work. We have to understand pain is a portal of consciousness. What I mean by that is the universe teaches us through pain. So we can be stuck in a pattern for 20 years. But when we wake up, we wake up. We are all on a spiritual journey and we awaken every day. So when somebody asks that, why should I do some work if I'm going to move naturally to a homeostasis? Why should I do hypo and hyper, wherever I am? Why should I do the work? The thing is, if you are introspective, you understand that you want to make most of your day. You understand the fact that you want to be the best version of yourself in every relationship, then only you will seek help, right? So pain is a portal of consciousness. What I mean by that is you can't convince somebody to do their work. What you can do is you can guide them, you can suggest to them. But pain is such a thing is if you ignore something, remember whatever you resist, it persists, whatever that might be, right? So what happens is if you did not listen when, let's say, you had a small cyst in your, let's say, in your fallopian tubes or whatever in your, yeah. So if you leave it, it will start growing and growing and growing, and after 4 or 5 years, you really have to get operated because now it is very big. You are in a lot of pain. What happened? A series of events happened. When you ignored, the pain increased until you reached a point where now you can't avoid pain. You are so much in pain, you need to be operated, right? So same thing with life. We are all going through our consciousness journey. We are all learning new things every time. And you can only suggest, you cannot force anyone to do their work until they realize themselves, inshallah, then they can do their work.
Thank you. And okay, last couple questions. Is the lecture going to be posted on YouTube? It is going to be posted on Facebook, and I don't know about YouTube yet. YouTube, right? Yes.
Most probably we can upload it to both.
Okay. Yes. So, and then can this therapy, the RTT therapy, be done on a child? I feel that when my son was nonverbal, he got therapy that left him more in trauma than it helped than helpful. He was getting ABA therapy.
Okay, so yes, 100%. I got this RTT thing. I'm studying it, as I just said. And RTT is very good for even children. So one of my friends is an RTT therapist, and she was telling me the other day, she had a 4-year-old child because they had a bedwetting problem. So she helped the child from bedwetting. RTT helps in multiple ways, even if people are addicted, like example, consciously, if somebody wants to leave smoking and they are suffering for 10 years or 15 years, they consciously want to do it, but there is something holding them in the subconscious mind. So it creates a shift. What is holding you back? During hypnosis, you will reveal that. Then the therapist heals you and you get a recording. So yes, for children also it's advisable. We do it for kids as well, for nail biting issues, for bedwetting issues, because these are normal things like we think, but these are behaviors that then, parents suffer. They want to try to help the child, and the shift can happen even with these kind of behaviors, with addiction. It helps.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sister Sukaina, and also thank you, Sheikh Mehdi Rastani. We have to conclude now, although there are a couple unanswered questions. I'm very sorry, but we have to conclude. Can I have the YouTube link, please? The YouTube link, where can people find it?
I think they can just search on YouTube for
City of Knowledge.
City of Knowledge, and the channel should pop up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, cool. Okay, thank you so much, Sheikh and Sister Sukaina. It was a pleasure having y'all speak today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.